Hey, what is going on guys? Rufus Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the jungle tier list for preseason patch 8.23. So for tier 1 to start it off in this patch here is going to be Khazix. So Khazix was one of the best benefiters from the Dark Harvest changes in this patch. He's doing super well with Dark Harvest right now, one of the best Dark Harvest junglers that you can play, and probably the best just AD assassin jungler that you can play for the preseason. Because of the dragon buffs in this patch, it does kind of indirectly buff Khazix, because Khazix is one of the best champions for soloing the dragon early in the game, and he's also one of the best champions at just dueling. If he can get the jump on his opponent when he does look for a duel in the early game, he's going to win that almost every single time because of the isolation damage. So he's overall just a pretty strong pick for the current meta for this patch with the changes that did occur. So second in the tier 1s for this patch is going to be Xin Zhao. So Xin didn't really get any changes that made him stronger over this patch or the past few patches. He's just stayed a pretty consistent jungler for the past few patches now, and he's still a great pick in this patch. The early game is still very important. I think that early game junglers are still going to thrive the most right now in this patch, and Xin Zhao, because of his ability to pressure really well in the early game, because he does have some of the best level 2 gank ability for any jungler, he still remains a great pick for this patch. So next up, Shaco, along with Khazix, is a very strong assassin jungler for 8.23. Shaco is doing great with the new Dark Harvest right now. He's a jungler for solo queue that if you do get a small lead in the early game, he's just one of the most annoying junglers to have to deal with. He's also a jungler that if the enemy team just doesn't constantly keep track of and constantly keep thinking about where he could be on the map, then you're just going to be able to pop out of stealth, one-shot people all over the place, and if you can just do that consistently with Shaco, then he's just going to be a great solo queue pick for you. So it feels like this jungler's been S tier or tier 1 for pretty much the whole season. Graves is still a super strong pick for the current meta. For runes on Graves right now, Fleet Footwork is the one that's most consistent on him for this patch. A lot of players are running Dark Harvest though. It's not a bad option on him. It does give him more kill threat, more kill potential. So if you do feel like you want more damage, run the Dark Harvest. If you like the survivability and you like the cutting potential, then Fleet Footwork is going to be a great choice as well. So Graves does still have one of the strongest early games for any jungler. His clear in the jungle is super good. He's going to stay very healthy. He's going to clear out very fast. And because Graves doesn't actually take a whole lot of damage from minions and monsters, or just from monsters in the jungle, a lot of players are opting into taking the health in the runes instead of the armor. What you're going to see in this patch is a lot of junglers will take the armor in the rune tree to just kind of help out with their jungle clear so they don't take as much damage from the monsters, but you don't really need that armor on Graves. As long as you're kiting correctly, you can take the health instead. Now, one champion that benefited a lot from the rune changes in this patch is Rammus. So Rammus is a jungler that wants to take armor, and because of the changes to the runes and the introduction of you being able to take armor in your runes, it's just great for Rammus because he can start with that armor now in the rune tree. It just makes his W even stronger in the early game. It adds to his tankiness there, and the synergy between those new runes and Rammus just makes him a much stronger pick for this patch. The meta is just almost perfect right now for Rammus. You're seeing a lot less AP junglers now in this patch. We're seeing less Evelynn, less Talia because of the nerfs that she got, and we're seeing a lot of Lee Sin, a lot of Khazix, a lot of Xin Zhao, Camille. So Rammus, especially for the lower elos, is just a very consistent pick for this patch. He's going to be great in a lot of different situations, and he's a pretty easy to pilot jungler as well, so you are going to be able to pick him up and find success pretty quickly. One thing to remember if you're new to Rammus is to max out your Q first. A lot of Rammus players max their E out first for the taunt duration, but the extended cooldown or the shorter cooldown on your Q and the extra damage that you get from your Q for leveling it up first is just really good. It just adds to Rammus's mobility there in the early to mid game. I'm pretty sure once you max out your Q on Rammus, it's on like a 6-second cooldown, and then you can get some CDR in your build and it becomes even lower. So it just allows him to stay very mobile and always be looking to go for picks. And then to round out the tier 1s for this patch is going to be Camille. So Camille right now is basically, in my opinion, just a little bit harder to play version of Xin Zhao. She does take a little bit more time to get used to. Getting used to your hook shot when you're ganking in the early game does take a little bit more practice than just ganking with Xin Zhao. But if you can get that down with Camille, if you can consistently land your flash combo with your hook shot, then your gank potential in the early game is super good. She's got some of the best level 2 ganks for any jungler, so you can really snowball games out of control if you can make a presence in the early game with Camille. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, like for other junglers as well, for secondary runes, is that if you're taking the sorcery tree, absolute focus combined with water walking is what you should be taking in this patch. The changes to celerity just don't make it a very good choice on most champions right now, and it's going to be a much more inconsistent rune choice. Absolute focus is going to give you more damage there, it's going to increase your dueling potential, and it's also going to scale pretty well into the late game. So absolute focus and water walking, remember that for your secondary runes for 823. So for tier 2 in this patch, there are quite a few pretty interesting picks here. So I've moved Ivern up into tier 2, I've moved Fiddlesticks up, and Nunu as well. For Fiddlesticks right now, he's doing insanely well with the reworked Dark Harvest in this patch. I think that Fiddlesticks, especially for the lower elos, has always been a pretty underrated jungler. If you rush the Moby boots on Fiddlesticks, your ability to get around the map in the early game is really good, and because you've got your point and click CC with your Fear, your ability to just gank well in the early game is actually quite underrated. So I think that Fiddlesticks right now is a pretty strong pick. Once you do move up into the elos and you're playing against a lot of these strong early game junglers, I do think he does get quite a bit weaker, but if you're in the lower elos, I think the pick can be very strong for 823. And then for Nunu and Ivern, both champions have been buffed in previous patches, and both champions do a pretty good job right now at just not allowing these strong early game junglers to get ahead in the early game. They're pretty good picks at just neutralizing these junglers like the Xin Zhao, the Camille, that just want to look to gank a ton in the early game. If you can do a good job at shutting those junglers down and reach your mid to late game, then you are going to heavily outscale those jungle picks and just be a lot more useful than them come the mid to late game. With dragons getting increased stats in this patch as well, it is an indirect buff to Nunu. Nunu's ability to solo out that dragon in the early game is really good. So Nunu is a pick that I think is pretty underrated for this patch right now. And if you are looking for a good tank jungler, then I would recommend picking him up. And then Jax is one more carry jungler pick that does very well right now against some of the meta junglers. He does really good into Xin Zhao. He can do great in that matchup because if you can time your counter strike well, you can negate the knockup from Xin Zhao's Q, and you can just negate a lot of the bonus damage from Xin Zhao's Q that he does have. He can also be a pretty good pick into stuff like Master Yi that you see a lot in the lower elos, and just any champion that is somewhat auto attack focused, and that's where a lot of their damage comes from. So Jax is a pick right now that I would recommend giving a shot if you have yet to in 823. And then for tier 3 or B tier for this patch, a lot of these picks are pretty good for 8.23. I don't think they're super weak, but they're also just outshined right now by a lot of the tier 2 and the tier 1 jungle picks. If you can play a champion in the tier 2 or tier 1, then there's no point in really picking up any of these champions right now. I think that if you're looking for a good tank jungler or a good utility jungler, then you can just play Nunu instead of something like the Gragas or the Amumu or the Volibear. If you're looking for a good carry jungler, then something like Camille is just 10 times better than the Vi if you can play them at the same level. So the champions in here just overall get outclassed by champions in other tiers. And then for tier 4 or C tier for this patch, you've got your usuals in Sejuani, Skarner, Zac, and Trundle. These junglers have been pretty weak for the past few patches now. And then you do have a new addition, Talia. Talia did end up getting that nerf in this patch, which drastically reduces her clear in the early game in the jungle. So she's no longer a super viable jungle pick. And then for Hecarim, due to the celerity changes, he actually is doing a lot weaker in this patch right now. The celerity changes seem to be hurting him quite a bit for 823, so I would be staying away from him if you are looking to climb. So that is going to round out the first tier list for the preseason patch 8.23. If you guys do have any questions about the tier list, if you do want to discuss a certain jungler on the tier list, then head over to my Discord. I am using Discord a lot more. It's a lot easier to communicate over on Discord than in the YouTube comment section. So if you do want to ask me a question, then there's going to be a link down in the description and you guys can head over to the Discord channel. With that being said, guys, if you did enjoy, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.